If you're sick of the endless negativity in the news, you've come to the right place. We've gathered some of the best good news stories from around the world to lift your spirits. What's the #1 achievement any medical worker or scientist would love to attach their name to? Curing cancer, of course. There's certainly good news in this department, as a new treatment that vibrates molecules has found incredible success, destroying 99% of cancer cells. Plus, the legendary dodo bird, having been extinct for over 360 years, could be brought back to life thanks to science. By implanting cells in the embryo of a chicken, a new generation of dodo birds could be walking the earth again in a matter of years. Let's dive into the incredible research behind these stories, plus many more. I'm your host Regis, and join me as we discover 7 good news stories from all around the world. Let's start with some good news from the United States that might surprise you, where homicides have declined by record numbers in 2023. An analysis of over 175 cities found that the country is experiencing one of the fastest drops in violent crime in recorded history. That's a stark contrast to 2020, when murder rates surged up by nearly a third through a combination of economic factors, racial tensions during protests, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. One survey found that 2/3 of Americans think the state of crime in society is very serious. Another found that a vast majority, 77% of all Americans, felt that crime was more widespread than a year earlier. Throughout the year, media outlets and political commentators alarmed the public about climbing crime rates, especially in major cities, fueled by various viral videos. Even I was scared by some of the videos from that last year. But despite the media attention, the latest figures show that some of these fears are not in line with reality. In almost all different city sizes, the murder and violent crime rates have dropped dramatically. Murders were down 15.6%, while violent crime dropped by 8.2%. The reopening of social services and the processing of court cases are thought to be big reasons for the downtick in crime. On top of that, the US economy has so far avoided a widely anticipated recession, and instead, job growth and consumer spending have improved significantly. It just goes to show you can't always believe what you see online, aside, of course, from what you see on Good News. Now, let's move over to the world of science, where a new invention could mean that animal testing becomes a thing of the past. For decades, animals have been used to test medicine, drugs, chemicals, and other products before they're ready for humans. Animal activists have protested the practice, though for many kinds of essential drugs, there haven't been any other viable options. Now, finally, that could be changing, with an innovation from a research team at the University of Edinburgh. They've created a 3D printed device that acts as a substitute for the human body. It includes functioning synthetic organs in different compartments that mimic the way our blood and other compounds move throughout the body. That means that medicine or other drugs can be funneled into the system to see how each of the compartments reacts. The device is called a body-on-chip, and it's already received more than $450,000 in funding. The technology it's built on is a type of 3D imaging that transmits detailed information about the internal activity of each separate chip. As a medicine or drug moves through the system, the imaging technology gives an accurate evaluation of how each organ might respond. But the body-on-chip does more than just provide an ethical way to test products. It may even be more precise than the previous testing on animals. Organ-on-chip devices have already been shown to have the potential to replicate the heart, intestines, kidneys, and even the entire neurovascular system, making it possible to carry out research that could help combat diseases like Parkinson's. More good news comes from the southeast coast of Africa in Mauritius, where a plan has been hatched to reintroduce the long-extinct dodo bird. The dodo was a flightless bird native to Mauritius, weighing up to 20 kilograms, whose last recorded sighting was in 1662, more than 360 years ago. It was driven to extinction by human use of the land, hunting, and the introduction of foreign species like rats. Now, thanks to a pioneering company, the dodo bird could be brought back to life. The company has sequenced the entire genome of the species, meaning that the unique genetic code that creates the animal has actually been deciphered. Scientists now believe that they can grow what are called primordial germ cells in a chicken embryo to produce a hybridized animal. The process would take cells from the Nicobar pigeon, which is the closest living relative to the dodo bird, and then customize its genes to match all of the physical traits of a dodo. Then these cells will be implanted into a chicken embryo, meaning that once the chicken gives birth, it will be fully capable of repopulating. If this process is successful, then the dodo could become the first truly extinct animal to be resurrected. Local wildlife associations in Mauritius are planning to return the bird to its native environment and are already considering which part of the island could be used as its home. Isn't that just the plot of Jurassic Park? Let's hope that the dodo remains small and flightless like they're supposed to be. Our next story takes us down to the micro level, where scientists are using artificial intelligence to fight against bacteria that are immune to antibiotics. Antimicrobial resistance is estimated to account for 10 million deaths per year by the year 2050. It's driven by the excessive use of antibiotics, creating something of an epidemic and proving that too much of a good thing can be worse for everyone. The problem is that using antimicrobials like antivirals and antibiotics reduces their effectiveness over time. That's because not all bacteria and germs are eliminated by antibiotics, and those that survive reproduce, creating species of bacteria and germs that have DNA resistant to the medicines that we use against them. This ends up having deadly consequences, where diseases spread more easily, making bacteria, fungi, as well as diseases like HIV and malaria way more dangerous. Thus, antimicrobial resistance has been classified as a top global public health threat by the World Health Organization. Now, researchers from Harvard and MIT have harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to find new kinds of antibiotics to help combat this growing problem. Around 39,000 different groups of molecules were fed into a deep learning AI model to determine which ones would be effective against the resistant bacteria called MRSA, or MRSA, which is linked to around 100,000 deaths a year. Using several different deep learning programs, 280 candidate compounds were identified, and after lab testing, the first new antibiotics in more than 6 decades were discovered. With the power to quickly process, sort, and identify patterns in huge data sets, artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly important in medical research, and thus enabling more discoveries. By the way, if you want to add a little bit more good news to your homepage, then make sure you subscribe to our channel. Thank you in advance for your support. Next up, we move to a different kind of drug, where the US government has pardoned marijuana use nationwide. Decades after the war on drugs was launched in the United States, its president has made a historic change by announcing that Americans convicted of personal possession of marijuana will be pardoned after the fact.
As I said when I ran for president, no one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana.
The policy will apply nationwide, meaning that people serving time in federal prisons solely for possession of a personal amount of marijuana could be freed. 11 offenders have already had their sentences reduced because they were considered disproportionate to their actions. Marijuana, which falls under the umbrella of cannabis, has been accepted for limited medical use since the 1970s and is now legal for personal recreational use in 24 different states. Several cannabis products have been approved for the market, and it's been found to help in the treatment of a range of symptoms and illnesses, from pain and anxiety to glaucoma, PTSD, and multiple sclerosis. Momentum has been building even quicker since last year. United States authorities recommended that cannabis should be treated alongside drugs like ketamine rather than heroin in terms of the potential for abuse. Months after the recommendation, the Biden administration pardoned thousands of people convicted of simple possession, which means having a small amount for personal use. This does not apply to anyone convicted of producing or distributing the drug. Important to note. Over in Sweden for our next story, an innovative company has created the first sodium-ion battery to slash the cost of electric vehicle production. Battery technology has taken a huge step forward after a breakthrough from Swedish startup Northvolt. The company has accrued billions of dollars in funding, with investments coming from financial and automotive companies like BlackRock and Volkswagen. Northvolt is the biggest competitor to the rising battery production in Asia, particularly in China, South Korea, and Japan. Current electric batteries rely on lithium or cobalt, both of which largely come from Chinese-owned companies. Around the world, China controls around 56% of the electric vehicle battery market, a dominance that could cause problems for electric car production in the future. That's why Northvolt's innovation with a sodium-ion battery is such a breakthrough. The new sodium-ion cell doesn't have any lithium, cobalt, or other rare metals in it, making it cheaper and much more accessible. Instead, it uses a material called phenic, which is made up of more common elements like carbon, nitrogen, iron, and of course, sodium. With an abundance of the raw materials needed to make them, sodium-ion batteries are way cheaper than their lithium or cobalt counterparts. While the cost of a metric ton of sodium carbonate is around $290, the same amount of lithium carbonate is a massive $35,000. I hope that means that Teslas will drop to 1/100th of their price too, but I'm not holding my breath. Research has also found that sodium-ion batteries have about the same carbon footprint as lithium-ion batteries. In the transition away from fossil fuels, sodium could prove to be the key ingredient in making the green economy sustainable. And for our final story today, scientists have found a way to kill over 99% of cancer cells. The answer lies in tiny molecules called aminocyanine, which already have been used in medicine before, but mainly for imaging to detect certain types of cancer. They're a type of synthetic dye that's passed through the blood and can be used to measure blood flow. Researchers have now found a new way to use them by vibrating in sync with one another. A powerful oscillation called a plasmon is created, acting kind of like a molecular jackhammer, for lack of a better term. To activate the vibration, near-infrared light is used, which is imperceptible to the human eye. It can travel through the body's flesh safely without causing any harm, but when the aminocyanine molecules begin vibrating, they can damage surrounding molecules. These jackhammers are strong candidates for treating cancer cells because they make deeper parts of the body more accessible, which would make it possible to destroy cancer cells without the invasive surgeries. Using that method, tests have so far destroyed 99% of synthetic cancer cells. It works by pulling apart the membrane cell with the intensity of the molecular plasmon's vibrations. A test run on mice with melanoma tumors resulted in half of them having their cancer cells completely eliminated. While getting the molecular jackhammer treatment from the testing phase to clinical use will likely take years, if not decades, this promises huge potential if it can be safely implemented on humans. Are there any other good news stories that have caught your attention recently? And which of the stories from today's video are you the most excited about? Let us know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching as always, and we'll see you in the next episode of Good News.